underground water production. Water that has evaporated due to sunlight and high temperatures descends with the phenomenon of rain or snow and accumulates in the soil. Some of this water creates rivers, but there are two types of rivers. A. The ones that are seasonal and their flow fluctuates. B. Those that are constantly flowing. Some of this water enters into cavities. The size of the cavity that accumulated water inside the earth creates these two categories. If it is large, then it accumulates more water and does not manage to run out before the new rains. If it is small, then it creates a seasonal river, since when this tank empties, the river dries up. For the case B, springs and rivers occur at a much higher rate for another reason. All this water is stored inside the earth, but not only in cavities or in places that act as reservoirs. The whole earth would not have enough space to hold all this water. In the same way that we have the creation of water in the air of the atmosphere, we also have the creation of water in an underground water cycle inside the earth. As we have condensation due to cooling in the atmosphere, the same process of condensation takes place inside the earth where cold prevails. This underground condensation and the creation of underground water takes place continuously and takes place inside the earth, creating droplets, gushing water, and finally springs. The earth produces more gushing water and has more springs in the mountains, while we would say that altitude is a necessary condition for the creation and existence of a spring, since it is not common to find springs in lowland places. This is because of the mountain's function. It is like hanging sponges that collect water. The highest points at altitude receive the most groundwater, while the flow of gushing water is constant and comes from many different places, having a specific flow from each one. Underground rivers. The sources of the rivers are not due to specific pits of the soil. The space of the whole earth would not be enough to hold the storage of this volume of water. Also, it would not be possible to find so much water to supply all these rivers with a constant flow. What mainly happens is the underground water cycle. At the foot of the mountains, we start to have springs because there slowly begins the cycle of creation of groundwater, creating cavities and gaps with stored water. These cavities can be small or large, and when they receive more water inside the earth, they grow, pushing the subsoil down. Rivers originate from springs that are at altitude, and these are continuous flow, having water from the underground water condensation cycle. Many rivers become underground at intervals, and they are swallowed by the earth while then flown again outside the ground to another point. There are also many underground rivers that flow inside a mountain underground to another place where they become rivers on the surface of the earth. Examples of this type are some rivers in Asia such as Bactros, Jaspis, and Araxes, as well as the Indian River originate from groundwater where they come from mountains located in Greece. The Caucasus feeds many rivers that are quite far away as the Feiss, and the mountains of the Black Forest in Germany feed the Danube and Rhine. So we see that just as there are rivers on the surface of the earth, in the same way there are underground rivers inside the earth that can go very far. A prerequisite is the altitude, since there the underground water cycle works, making the rocks of the mountains like a sponge, gushing the water that produced underground. The rocks of the mountains have a very dense texture, and also there is a cold climate, so it favors the condensation of water in the underground water cycle, so this water is slowly stored and then rises and becomes a source. The lower altitudes are composed of rocks which are, as we said, porous, limestone or clay, without being able to hold water. Inflow lakes. The appearance of such a lake is found on a small scale, but also on a large scale. An example of such a lake is the Caspian Sea, where many rivers flow, but at the same time the level does not rise and there is no outflow on the surface. Also, the Caspian Sea is not connected to a single and continuous sea. In these cases, the water accumulates underground, creating streams of cold water that flow down while the warmer and salty water remains up. The water is stored below the surrounding area underground, around the greater depth of the lake. The amount of water in the lake remains the same, its depth is very large, while there are sources of fresh water inside the lake in shallower areas.